All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rashab Kosh, and uh, okay, sorry. Well, okay, my colleague might be in some connection issues right now, so
Oh
for
yeah,
now,
sorry about that.
okay.
It's back now. Sorry about that. My name's Srivatsa.
And today we would like to present a physics-guided hybrid neural network for the prediction of diffusion Monte Carlo energies in organic molecules. And we'll get more into what those keywords mean later into the presentation.
All right. So, so the core issue we're tackling here is that molecular energy calculations are extremely important in biological sciences, especially in drug design. When you're designing a drug, you need to know the energy of the molecules you're working with. That helps determine whether a molecule is stable and whether the drug will function effectively in the body. This also plays a critical role in protein folding and unfolding, which, as you can see in the figure here, is related to diseases like cancer. The energy levels of molecular components determine how proteins behave structurally, and any misfolding can lead to major issues. The Schrödinger equation shown at the bottom right is used to solve for the ground state energies. It works perfectly for hydrogen or maybe helium, but for anything more complex, it breaks down due to electron correlation and other electronic interactions. Due to this, there's no closed form solution for multi-electron systems. Because of this, we have to rely on approximation. And that brings us to the next slide, the potential solution. To address this, we start with the Born-Oppenheimer approximation. This approximation simplifies the total energy of a molecule by separating it into different components: electronic, vibrational, rotational, and nuclear and spin energies, as shown in the equation here. From this approximation, we get a whole class of techniques called self-consistent field method approximation, or SCF methods. Here's how they work. We start by inputting the 3D coordinates of the atomic nuclei, then make an initial guess for what the molecular orbitals might look like. From there, we build a Fock matrix representing the electron interactions, and then diagonalize it to simplify the math and calculate an energy. We then iteratively tweak the orbitals and recalculate until changes in energy are negligible. This is also known as the SCF convergence. The simplest version of this is the Hartree-Fock method, which is reference 4, but it neglects electron correlations. And that's why the molar placet perturbation theory, as shown in reference 5, improves upon this by adding correction terms. While all these methods are powerful, they're still approximations. And that's why, later on, we'll look at diffusion Monte Carlo, which is a more accurate technique for finding ground state energies. Before we get to that, let's look at our past work. In our previous research, we used classical Monte Carlo methods. Monte Carlo here meaning a stochastic process to generate conformational isomers of acyclic alkanes. Our goal was to study how molecular energy trends change with geometry. We calculated ground state energies for each molecule using molar placet perturbation theory. We saw certain trends as bond angles decrease, but as molecule size increased, the computational costs also rose, in fact, scaling polynomially. This left us with the worst of both worlds: approximate energies and high computational expense. That motivated us to rethink our approach. To address those limitations, our new objective is to use a much more accurate method for molecular energy calculation. That is, as mentioned before, diffusion Monte Carlo, and combine it with machine learning. This way, we aim to improve accuracy while managing computational costs, enabling us to tackle larger and more complex systems effectively.
Thank you very much, Srivatsa. And now moving forward in our presentation, I would like to discuss our methodology as well as the core aspects of our research. So to begin, I would like to go over our methodology. And so to do that, we are first performing diffusion Monte Carlo calculations using a dataset known as QM7 X, which I'll get into a later slide. And we're going to utilize a software known as QMCPACK for said calculations. Next, we're going to pre-process the DMC energy values to serve as training data set, which means determine get a molecule, determine its DMC energy, as well as other inputs in for our machine learning model. And we're going to pre-process all of that training data set, or training data for our data set. And then we're going to train our neural network and tune hyperparameters in that machine learning model to predict energy values of any given molecule going forward. And then finally, to compare, we're going to benchmark between our predicted DMC energies for molecules that the AI model hasn't seen versus actual molecules versus actual energies uh, obtained from QMCPACK calculations for those same set of molecules. And to begin that, we're going to first begin with the QM7 X dataset. And to do that, we're going to utilize 57 representative molecules using a k-nearest neighbors algorithm for classifying. The QM7X dataset is a dataset comprised of 42,000 different compounds with 100 unique equilibrium and non-equilibrium structures for each molecule, totaling out to about 4.2 million unique molecular structures. When for each of those, we have 42 physiochemical properties for each structure, and using that, we made our k-nearest neighbors classifying algorithm to classify based on a density functional theory based energy value, as well as geometric properties for each molecule. And in doing that, what we did was we clustered them based on their molecular size, molecular geometry, as well as the energy value I mentioned earlier. Using these parameters, we clustered all the molecules into 8 groups and randomly picked a certain amount of molecules from each group to make our representative molecule data set. And here you can see a graphical depiction of how our QM7X dataset is represented or looks like. Now, moving forward, before I go into more depth into our research, I want to take a quick look at what diffusion Monte Carlo is and how it operates because, as mentioned earlier, it gives nearly exact ground state energies of molecules, but it's kind of a black box. So to begin, it still utilizes the Schrödinger equation, but instead of computing it in real time, it uses imaginary time to calculate it. As you can see in reference 7, that's the actual Schrödinger equation in imaginary form. And the reason it's calculated in imaginary form is because in real time for multi-electron systems, the Schrödinger equation offers a solution that's periodic, repeating solution, and that's not possible to use, that cannot be used for in the real world. And so if we use imaginary time, our Schrödinger solution becomes follows a negative exponential or an exponentially decaying model. And so as time goes on, your energy values start to converge to a specific to specific value, and thus we actually get an energy instead of just seeing an oscillatory pattern in our wave function. And the actual mechanics behind diffusion Monte Carlo work in a similar way. We start off with an initial wave function, which is our guess at what the wave function of the molecule could look like at its ground state. And then we utilize what is known as walkers, which simulate electrons, except they randomly move uh, over each time step tau. And in doing that, its energy changes with each time step. So that over a course of many, many time steps, eventually all of the walkers will uh, converge to a certain energy value, which you can see as psi of x. And that is essentially what our um, final energy value would actually be. And there are a bit more complications to how diffusion Monte Carlo actually works, except for the purposes of this presentation, I'll leave that to the very end for questions if anyone's curious. Finally, once you have your psi of x energy function, you can use this scary looking equation at the bottom to sample that function, find the peak, the highest density. As you can see, it looks like a curve. You can find the peak of that curve and determine what the energy value is there and take that as your ground state energy value. And for our research specifically, we're planning on using about 6,500 walkers, those little electron simulation objects, as well as about 60,000 time steps. And these parameters were chosen to balance load between computational expense as well as high accuracy ground state energies. Because diffusion Monte Carlo, because it's doing so many things for each time step, like it's moving the walker around, it's calculating the energy, and it's doing that for all the time, all the walkers. Diffusion Monte Carlo scales with O of n cubed time for each electron. And that's another reason why we're trying to utilize machine learning to get high energy, high accuracy energy values, but also at much, much faster and more efficient speeds. And as I said again, that provides highly accurate energy calculations for many body systems. Now going into machine learning. The main, our machine learning architecture is a hybrid model comprised of a graphical isomorphism network, utilized a graph isomorphism network, GIN, utilized for extracting geometric properties like the topological structure of the molecule, as well as atomic coordinates, etc., as well as a physics-guided neural network, which is utilized because we create a feature vector of each molecule that we're assessing. And this feature vector is full of numerical data of the molecule, like its dipole moments, its polarizability tensor, as well as the more like homo-lumo gap and other scalar type properties. And that's an example of a property like atomization energy. And we pass that into a physics-guided neural network. And by combining our GIN data, the data we extract with our graph isomorphism network, with our physics-guided neural network, we can combine those into one neural network architecture in order to get a diffusion Monte Carlo ground state energy. And now you might be wondering why we're creating this robust pipeline for machine learning pipeline. Well, if you remember, I said that we're utilizing 57 molecules only for our entire training data set. And if any of you have experience with machine learning, you know that 57 molecules is absurdly small of a training data set size. But as I mentioned, diffusion Monte Carlo scales with O of n cubed time, and we can't calculate molecules with electrons more than, say, like 15 to 30 electrons without our computational expense running too high and it taking way too much time. And so that's why we're utilizing 57 molecules and this extremely robust pipeline in hopes to achieve a fully trained neural network model that can predict diffusion Monte Carlo energies in under 60 molecules in as small of a training data set as possible. And it has been done, literature has shown that similar concepts have been done before, which is why we're basing off of our research off of. And finally, here's our a graphical depiction of our full pipeline, starting with user input, getting the geometric features from the graph neural network, calculating our feature vectors, combining them in the physics-guided neural network, processing the data, and finally outputting a DMZ energy value, which again is our ground state energy value. And so for analysis and conclusion, again, we like to compare energies and runtimes, specifically our neural network's predicted energy values versus what the actual diffusion Monte Carlo energies are that our software QMCPACK gives us. Then we want to assess our neural network's runtime versus our previous Monte Carlo algorithms runtime and see the difference in runtime and processing time there is between the two. And we project this to be very important in industry because, again, as my colleague Srivatsa mentioned, uh, biological sciences and specifically like drug design, protein analysis, really require true molecular ground state energies to analyze properly. And so by doing that, in the drug design process, specifically our research, we hope will increase efficiency of the drug design process because it'll give researchers more accurate ground state energies of molecules as well as uh, faster time computing said energies. And again, this should substantially decrease energy calculation time, therefore achieving that efficiency that we're going towards.
To finish off, we would sincerely like to thank the following. First off is ASDRP for giving us this opportunity. Second of all, Dr. Paul Kemp from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory for giving us very insightful advice and help. And finally, to all of our previous group members and Miss Dr. McMahon. And here's a QR code with the references.